All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay. Next we have item 5, which is the school committee approval of the DEI community assessment. Mrs. Lima, this is really your subcommittee, and I know you've led the charge on this, so I think it would be best if I could have you take the mic and give an overview of what the proposal is so that we can have more information.
Sure. I'd like to thank everybody who spoke tonight, regardless of your opinions on it. I think it's important that this be discussed. The North Kingstown School Department mission is to educate our students to become intellectually active adults, to inspire them to reach individual excellence, and to challenge them to become responsible members of society. But excellence without equity is not excellence. It's hypocrisy. Recognizing that, the school committee voted in March to approve the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity Special Subcommittee to ensure that students have equitable access to educational opportunities that help them achieve their full potential while supporting and harnessing their individuality, as well as the history and backgrounds of their families and the entire North Kingstown community. After discussing various ways to go about achieving this charge, as well as meeting school committee goals, the subcommittee decided an equity audit conducted by an outside party was the best way to proceed. In October of 2021, the school department issued an RFP for a DEI community assessment, otherwise known as an equity audit. Before I talk about what an equity audit is, I want to talk about what an equity audit is not. It is not a predetermined outcome. It is not a pretense to dismantle and replace the school's curriculum and culture. It is not a money laundering scam designed to advance a political agenda, and equity does not destroy equality. Equality means each individual or group of people is given the same resources or opportunities. Equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. It's the difference between providing every child with a winter jacket versus providing every child with a winter jacket that fits. An equity audit is the study of the fairness of an institution's policies, programs, and practices. They are conducted in a variety of arenas, including, but not limited to, education. For example, corporations and governmental entities commonly conduct or are subject to employment equity audits, health equity audits, pay equity audits, gender equity audits, and technology equity audits, among others. Studies have shown that many educators continue to underestimate the degree to which achievement and opportunity gaps are present in their schools and districts, and often avoid discussing the structural causes of inequity, instead attributing achievement gaps to students' home life or their genetics. Administrators and teachers overwhelmingly do not have a clear, accurate, or useful understanding of the degree of inequity present in their own schools and school districts. Data is powerful. It separates personal agendas from organizational necessities. When data is collected, analyzed, and exhibited in a transparent way, it's difficult for teachers, parents, and even school board members to deny certain disparities in practices, deficiencies in systems, and gaps in outcomes. An equity audit allows one to collect data related to the many possible inequities within a school and/or classroom in terms of race, class, gender, disability, sexual identity, language, and so on. The conductor of an equity audit examines disaggregated data across several areas. The educator then selects one area to further examine, determines whether a pattern of inequity is occurring, analyzes the potential causes, collaboratively works to devise a solution, implements the identity, language, and so on. An equity audit benefits all students. The DEI subcommittee is recommending that the school department contract with Public Consulting Group to conduct a full-scale DEI community assessment that will examine all aspects of the educational process, including board policy, district programming, curriculum and instruction, human resources practices, budget allocations, and North Kingstown School Department's culture and climate. Public Consulting Group is excited to partner with North Kingstown School Department to accomplish our goal of employing strategies to identify and address the causes of inequity as part of an overall community assessment. The DEI subcommittee recommends accepting PCG's proposal as written. PCG was selected as the vendor for multiple reasons. Their evaluation services use qualitative and quantitative methodologies to help determine the progress of specific student populations, assess the impact of certain programs, and engage in informed, data-driven decision-making to foster improvement. They believe that understanding the root causes behind inequities in education system requires not only a review of written policies and data, but also includes engaging a variety of stakeholders in the process. They believe that student voice should be at the table for these conversations and that their voice is key. During their interview with us, they stressed that they are going to come in from a research background as an external party to take an objective look and have conversations that are grounded in data. It was stressed that having these conversations with someone that is not embedded in the district and coming in to do this work separately helps a lot. There is no agenda that can be pointed to and no personal history that can be pointed to. That being said, they reminded us that this work is hard. These conversations are personal, and these conversations can be difficult to have. But it's what they do, and they believe it's absolutely essential to make sure our district is serving every single child as much as it can. They also noted that across the country, COVID has perpetuated existing inequities, including the digital divide, access to food, etc. They understand the importance of reaching out in non-traditional ways in order to bridge what gaps may exist or have gotten wider. Under the ESSER guidelines, money can be used as follows: allocating resources in ways that advance equity, and ensuring those resources are adequate for providing the opportunities and supports that students need to succeed. This is particularly important as we recover from the disproportionate impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on communities of color and communities experiencing poverty. By addressing the many dimensions of resource equity, including equitable and adequate school funding, access to a well-rounded education, well-prepared, effective, and diverse educators and staff, and integrated support services, we can begin to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on schools and students and can close long-standing gaps in educational opportunity. The audit, as proposed, would cost $73,250 and would be paid for using ESSER funds if approved. A couple people have noted tonight, and I want to confirm that that amount is approximately 1.2% of all the ESSER funds that our district has been allocated. Concerns have been raised about additional costs resulting from the recommendations to implement post-audit. I have reviewed sample assessments from other districts, and I've actually spoken to personnel who've worked with PCG, and many improvements require resource allocation only. In one district, of the approximately 53 recommendations that were made, 45 of them are essentially free. For example, examining current policies and practices from an equity lens. When, how, and even if we decide to act on any of the audit's findings can all be discussed at a later date. But not looking at something because we may have to fix it is not a solution. If I ignore the leak in my ceiling, it's not going to go away. I know that not everyone in this town believes that we should proceed with this audit or even that it's needed. I honestly would like nothing better than to have the results come back indicating that there are no problems. However, a quick review of data available from the RIDE website reveals that there are inequities present within our district that show up in race and gender categories. In addition, while North Kingstown may not be a diverse community, many of our students are going to be competing in college and in the workforce outside of North Kingstown. Being able to operate in different cultural circles is an important skill, even for white people. It's a disadvantage not to prepare our students for the reality of a global society. Numerous schools and districts have made significant improvements in all areas of inequities through the use of these types of audits. It's not a question of whether it can be done, but whether we have the will, the commitment to do it. North Kingstown School Department's vision for our students states that we will provide a learning environment that meets the diverse needs of every student. In it, we say that we commit to using our resources to support our priorities: student learning and achievement, effective and innovative instruction, and continuous professional improvement. Proceeding with this audit supports that vision and affirms our commitment within this district to equity and inclusion.
Thank you, Mrs. Lima. So, I'll leave it up to any school committee members who have any questions or comments. And we would need a motion, actually, so we should start with a motion. Okay, Ms. Lima has made a motion to approve item 5. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
A second from Ms. Hildebrand. Okay. now we have a motion and a second. Discussion. Anyone have any comments or anything that they'd like to add?
Yeah, I would like
Mr.
to add
Mather.
a couple of things. So I'm also on this DEI subcommittee, and I shared a couple of points at the last meeting about the survey, or about the proposals rather. And although I completely agree, and this is in no way, I do support the equity audit. I agree with the intent of the equity audit entirely. Or maybe the entirely word is not appropriate. And I do understand that we don't know what we don't know, and that's the point of us doing this. But I do think that there are some elements of the proposals that we may know. And we had a fairly lengthy hour-long discussion about that at the last DEI meeting. And I would like to propose that we go back to these vendors, both of them, and ask them to amend their proposals to maybe pick out a few of the things that we think that we do know. We did address that, and we have had tremendous support for this from all over the community. We've also had a tremendous amount of not support. There's probably a better word than not support. And the vast majority of the people that didn't support this didn't support it on a budget for budgetary reasons. It's a lot of money. It's not a small amount of money to spend. And if we can trim $10,000 or $20,000 by pulling out some of the elements that we discussed in the DEI meeting 2 weeks ago, I think that would be a good step in the right direction. Again, I do support the audit. I support the survey. I support what we hopefully eventually will hire them to do, but I think there are a few things that we do know.
Yeah, and like you said, we talked about it at the subcommittee meeting, and the two areas that we honed in on were the curriculum and the data.
Yes.
And I think, I don't think anybody would disagree with you there, and I just want to confirm that the reason why the full committee voted to advance this was because of not knowing what we don't know. And it would be, if we just assume that we're good in that area, we're assuming instead of finding out. So,
I personally just think it's worth continuing the conversation just a little bit longer to get a few more answers, because I mean we are using ESSER funds and they do expire. The ESSER 2 funds don't expire until September of 23, and ESSER 3 funds, which we could conceivably use as well, don't expire until 2024. So there is time to do this and to get the answers, and ultimately if we get the answers, if we get the proposals and decide to still go through with the full, we can still do that. I just think not asking the questions, not gathering the information at this point is not doing us justice.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I just, the DEI subcommittee was charged with bringing a recommendation forth. The school committee has the authority to approve, reject, or amend. And so I think we have completed the DEI charge by bringing it to the table, and then what happens to it from here is up to us.
I think Jake's asking to amend it.
Yeah, no, and that's, I would, can you specify like what your...
It sounds to me like Jake is asking it to go back to the DEI subcommittee to amend it.
Right.
I am. I'm asking it to, I don't know if tabling it for tonight and bringing it back to the DEI subcommittee to get more information from our vendors. Is that a thing?
Well, the only thing that I'd note, and Mrs. King, I might call, I know this isn't necessarily a bid that you fully oversaw, but with the bidding process, we put an item out to bid, the bids are in. We can't just ask them to
change. Both vendors have to be at the...
Right.
Oh,
it would
understood.
essentially be rebid if that's what you're talking
bids
about.
Indicated that that the pieces could be broken up, they could be taken out. Like it's not a complete, like they broke it out into phases, and they said the phases can be done independently, separately, not at all. So it's...
So if that's the case, it still needs to be rebid?
And during the interview process...
I want to let Mrs. King to chime in a little.
No, I don't think you need to fully rebid, but whatever you ask
one vendor to do, you must give the other vendor the opportunity to do the same. So if you were asking a vendor to take out one or two pieces, you need to ask them both to do that and come back to you with revised pricing.
Okay.
And, you know, if you had 10 vendors, that's what you would need to do. You know, this is a public bidding process, so anything that you're asking of one, you need to give the other one the opportunity, a fair opportunity to provide you with the same information.
So if that's what folks would want to do, we'd need the simplest way to do that would be to withdraw the motion by unanimous consent and then put forth another motion. So is that what the consensus of the committee is, that you want to withdraw the motion to approve and then so anyone object to withdrawing the motion to approve? So no one's objecting. So we have unanimous consent to withdraw the motion. So we now need a new motion. So are you, I don't want to speak for you, so I'm not sure where you're going.
I'm not quite sure how to do it. I'd like to have a motion to bring this back to the DEI subcommittee and request additional information from both vendors.
In terms of,
what you want to do is you want to table tonight
And refer it back to the subcommittee.
for the purpose of sending it back
Yep.
to the subcommittee.
That's exactly what I want to do.
So could I also make a suggestion?
Certainly.
One of the things that I noticed in both proposals is that the timeline is definitely off because they both started in January.
Yep.
So I also would love the DEI subcommittee to have a conversation about that and when this proposal would be able to start. It seems to me as though we're already halfway through the middle of March, that it doesn't seem like it's something that could happen this school year, and to see how that might impact things, how things might get adjusted, and that also probably impacts the way a proposal is presented by these agencies. We don't know what their schedule is. Right. We don't know when they would be able to start, or if they would even still be in the running for something like this if we adjust the timeline.
Yep, that's reasonable.
Okay, so Mr. Mather, if I understood it, you made a motion that we table this item and refer it back to the DEI subcommittee for another look at basically going back to the vendors to clarify the bids and what options could be removed. So if I'm understanding you want the DEI subcommittee to say, okay, tell us what it'll cost without these things, and then it would go back to the vendors, right?
That is exactly the case.
Okay, so let me try to make that...
Both vendors were very agreeable to doing that during the interview process.
Let me make that more succinct. So we'll call it I'll make the motion just for simplicity. The motion would be to table this item, refer it to the DEI subcommittee to look at what items could be removed from the bids and then sent back to the vendors for clarification. Do I have a second? Second from Mr. Mather, I think, raised his hand a fraction of a second beforehand. Just with respect to discussion on that, I'm going to be really upfront and frank. I have said, and I continue to say, that I fully support the work of the DEI subcommittee. I support the forming of the DEI subcommittee and the work that you're doing. I've been very disappointed by a lot of commentary, misinformation, obfuscation, a lot of words I could choose for what some of the opponents have put out there in the public. I can also say that I've heard a lot of concerns from people who are opposed to the DEI survey, and I think a lot of them have merit as well. So I'm a little bit of a hard sell on this. I'm very concerned about the cost, the scope, and to the extent that the district has the ability to do some of these things ourselves. But just like I said when I voted to approve the bid itself, I have no problem with getting more information. So I'm willing to keep an open mind, vote for this motion to send it back, just with the understanding that, when I see these new proposals, I'm going to be looking at them with the same things in mind, and it may or may not have my support at that point. So that's where I stand. The commentary that, the classic line I hear all the time is, we're not a racist town, we don't need to do anything. I'm sorry, I just can't agree with a statement like that. There's far more to this than race, and it's just not, it's not that simple. There's clearly work to be done, and we can do better. I'm just not certain this is the best way we can do that, and it's the best way to spend this kind of funds. But we'll see when it comes back.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, Mrs. King.
So kind of along your lines, Mr. Chairman, this kind of audit, and I'm sorry that I don't know the answer to this, maybe this is a stupid question, but would this kind of audit also point to any issues that we have or that are identified as discrimination against women in the North Kingstown School Department?
It's my understanding that they would. They're looking for any type of inequity. So any type of discrimination, any type of disparate treatment, any type of anything that is affecting, the education. And I think that definitely falls into that category.
Yeah, I think that it does. I think that it would be very important that our young females understand when they are being discriminated against. I believe that there have been a lot of instances of that in North Kingstown. I know there have been against myself, but I would be more concerned with our younger females that, are not 56 years old and haven't put up with it for 56 years or 40-some years working in any kind of industry at all. So I do think that that's important. I just wasn't sure if that would be part of this kind of audit.
No, and I'm glad that you asked that question because I can't stress this enough. This is not just about race, and Chair Glasgow just alluded to that. It's about any type of inequity, any type of unfair treatment, anything that's affecting the students in this district. So,
okay. Thank you. So, right. So we have a motion on the table, which with a second. So, all those in favor to table and refer it back to the subcommittee? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes unanimously.